a veteran, a cashier, a debt that couldn't be forgotten. Jake Morrison thought helping the elderly man in the army cap was just the right thing to do, covering a few dollars when the veteran came up short for groceries, treating him with the respect he deserved. Just another quiet moment in an ordinary shift. But when the well-dressed stranger approached his register weeks later, Jake realized that soldier hadn't forgotten. The envelope in the man's hands was plain white, no return address, but heavy with something that would change everything. "You helped my father when he didn't have enough," the stranger said. "He never stopped talking about you." How could $4 and some basic decency travel so far? This is Hopeful Horizon. Before we begin, drop a comment with where you're watching from and subscribe for stories that prove small kindness changes lives forever. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows of Murphy's Market, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum as Jake Morrison settled into his routine at Register 4. 3:30 meant the after-school crowd would start trickling in soon, kids buying energy drinks, parents grabbing forgotten dinner ingredients, the usual mix of neighborhood regulars. He was restocking receipt paper when he noticed the elderly man shuffling toward his lane, a red plastic basket hanging from his arm like it weighed 50 pounds. The man wore a faded army cap pulled low over silver hair, his back bent with age, but his shoulders still carrying the ghost of military posture. Jake watched as the man carefully placed his items on the conveyor belt: a loaf of white bread, a dozen eggs, 2 cans of chicken soup, a small container of milk, and a pack of generic coffee filters. Basic necessities, Jake realized, the kind of shopping list that spoke of careful budgeting and meals stretched thin. "Good afternoon, sir," Jake said as he began scanning the items, noticing the way the man's weathered hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wallet. "Afternoon, son." The voice carried the careful courtesy of someone raised on "yes, sir" and "no, ma'am," though it was quieter now, raspier than it probably once was. Jake's register displayed the total, $29.47. The elderly veteran opened a worn leather wallet and began counting bills with the focused concentration of someone for whom every dollar mattered. $25 in crumpled bills, then coins from his pocket, quarters, dimes, nickels, counted twice to be sure. $28 and $28.73, the man said quietly, his face flushing red as he recounted the change. "I'm sorry, son. I thought I had enough." Behind him, other customers waited, some checking their phones, others shifting impatiently. Jake could feel the familiar pressure of the evening rush building, but something in the old man's eyes, pride fighting embarrassment, made everything else fade away. "It's fine, sir," Jake said, pulling out his own wallet. "I've got the rest." The veteran's head snapped up. "Son, I can't let you do that. I insist." Jake slid his own crumpled $5 bill across the counter. "Thank you for your service." The old man stared at Jake for a long moment, his eyes bright behind wire-rimmed glasses. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 3 quarters, pressing them into Jake's palm with shaking hands. "At least take this," he whispered, "for your kindness." Jake gently closed the man's fingers around the coins. "Keep it, sir. Buy yourself a coffee." Other customers in line watched the exchange in silence, some with impatience, others with something softer. Jake bagged the groceries carefully, making sure the eggs were cushioned and the bread wouldn't get crushed. As he handed over the bags, the veteran reached across the counter and gripped Jake's hand. "What's your name, son?" "Jake Morrison, sir." "Well, Jake Morrison, you've got the heart of a soldier." The old man's voice was thick with emotion. "Your parents raised you right." As the veteran walked toward the exit, he paused at the automatic doors and turned back. His right hand came up in a crisp salute, not the casual wave of a civilian, but the precise gesture of military respect. Jake, surprised, nodded back respectfully. Then the old man was gone, disappearing into the parking lot with his groceries and his dignity intact. Jake turned to the next customer, a woman with a cart full of frozen dinners who smiled at him warmly. "That was a beautiful thing you did," she said. He shrugged, already reaching for her items. "Just seemed right." The rest of his shift passed normally. Jake clocked out at 8, grabbed his backpack from his locker, and headed home to tackle his history homework. By the time he went to bed, the encounter had faded to just another moment in an ordinary day. 2 weeks passed without any sign of the elderly veteran. Jake found himself glancing toward the entrance during his shifts, wondering if the old man was okay, if he was eating well, if that small gesture had made any real difference. Maybe it hadn't mattered at all. Maybe the man had forgotten about it entirely. Jake began to doubt himself. Was he being naive to think that $4 and some basic human decency could mean anything significant? The store fell into its familiar rhythm. After-school crowds, evening shoppers, weekend rushes. Jake learned to recognize the regulars. Mrs. Patterson, who bought cat food and romance novels, teenage couples sharing bags of chips, construction workers grabbing energy drinks and sandwiches. But no army cap, no trembling hands counting change, no quiet, "Thank you, son." It was a Thursday evening, nearly 3 weeks after the encounter, when Jake noticed the well-dressed man approaching his register. Mid-50s, wearing a pressed button-down shirt and khakis that looked expensive. He wasn't carrying any groceries, just walking straight toward lane 4 with purpose. Jake glanced around, wondering if the man was lost or looking for customer service. "Can I help you, sir?" The stranger stopped at his register and studied Jake carefully. "You're the boy from lane 4, right? The one who helped my father a few weeks ago?" Jake's heart began to race. "Your father? Elderly gentleman, army cap, short on grocery money?" The man's voice was warm but serious. "He told me about a young cashier who wouldn't let him leave empty-handed." "Is he okay?" Jake asked immediately. The man smiled. "He's fine. More than fine, actually. Thanks to you." The stranger reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain white envelope, placing it carefully on the counter between them. "My father is Harold Chen, Sergeant First Class, retired. Served 2 tours in Vietnam, worked construction for 30 years after that. Lost my mother last year, and his pension, well, it doesn't stretch as far as it used to." Jake stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. "That day you helped him, he came home and couldn't stop talking about it. Said a young man treated him with more respect in 5 minutes than he'd felt from strangers in months. He's been saving up to come back and thank you properly, but..." The man's voice caught slightly. "His health isn't what it was." "You don't need to thank me," Jake said quickly. Please." The man pushed the envelope closer. "Open it." With trembling hands, Jake tore open the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter in careful script and a check that made his knees go weak. The amount was enough to cover his community college tuition for an entire year, money he'd been saving for with every paycheck, every tip, every dollar he could scrape together. The letter read, "Dear Jake, real honor isn't about medals or parades. It's about the quiet moments when someone chooses kindness over convenience, respect over indifference. You gave an old soldier something worth more than groceries. You gave him dignity. My son tells me you're working to pay for college. A young man with your character deserves every opportunity this world can offer. Please accept this gift not as payment for your kindness, but as an investment in the kind of person you already are. Soldiers fight for freedom. You fought for something just as important, basic human decency. Thank you for reminding this old warrior that heroes come in all ages. With respect and gratitude, Sergeant Harold Chen, U.S. Army, retired." Jake read the letter twice before the words fully sank in. When he looked up, his eyes were blurred with tears. "I don't understand," he whispered. "This is too much." "My father spent 40 years serving his country and building houses," the man said. "He's never forgotten what it means to help someone build their future. Will you let him do that for you?" Jake nodded, unable to speak. "Good." Harold's son smiled. "He'll be happy to know his groceries were worth it." Jake Morrison didn't have a college fund. He didn't have wealthy parents or a trust account waiting for his 18th birthday. But he had something no amount of money could teach: a grandfather's lessons about treating everyone with dignity and the stubborn belief that respect costs nothing but means everything. Harold Chen came to that grocery store counting pennies and left counting blessings. He found a young man who saw past the trembling hands and faded uniform to the person underneath, a soldier who'd served his country and deserved honor, not pity. And Jake? He learned that real kindness doesn't just help people, it transforms them. It reminded a forgotten veteran that his service still mattered, and it reminded a working teenager that character opens doors money never could. This story isn't about a reward for good behavior. It's about the invisible bonds that connect us across generations, the kind that show up in grocery store aisles in handwritten letters, proving that respect given freely always finds its way back. If this story made you believe in something again, even for a second, let us know in the comments. Tell us, who taught you that everyone deserves dignity? The person whose example shaped how you treat strangers. Hit subscribe for more stories that prove the smallest gestures echo the loudest. Until next time, look for the heroes hidden in plain sight. They're usually older and braver than you think. This is Hopeful Horizon, signing off.